Guadalcanal, summer 1943. The air is not just hot, it is a physical weight. It smells of rotting jungle, high-octane aviation fuel, and the unending dampness of the Solomon Islands. On the pierced steel planking of Fighter Strip 2, Ensign Jack Braddock sits strapped into the cockpit of a Vought F4U Corsair. They call it the whistling death, for the sound air makes over its oil cooler intakes at high speed. They also call it the Ensign Eliminator. Braddock, with barely 300 hours of flight time, understands the second name better. The Corsair is not a welcoming machine. It is a massive 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine with a cockpit bolted to the rear as an afterthought. The nose is so long that taxiing is an act of faith. You cannot see the ground directly in front of you. You have to zigzag, esterning along the taxiway, praying you don't put a wheel into the mud. The defining feature of the plane is the inverted gull wing, the distinctive bent shape designed to provide clearance for the massive 13-foot Hamilton Standard propeller. It looks predatory sitting on the ground. In the air, it is a monster of torque. Braddock's briefing is simple, brutal mathematics. The Japanese Mitsubishi A6M0 is lighter, turns tighter and climbs faster below 10,000 feet. The Corsair is faster in a straight line, dives like a lead brick, and is rugged as an anvil. "Do not turn with them," the squadron commander, Major Pappy Doyle, had growled, champing on a wet cigar. "You get into a turning fight with a Zero, you are writing your own obituary. Keep your speed up, slash and run. If they get on your tail, dive. Do not try to out-wrestle them horizontally." The doctrine is sound. It is written in the blood of the Wildcat pilots who fought here in '42. Energy is life, speed is armor. Braddock is 22 years old, from a corn town in Nebraska, and he is terrified not of the Japanese, but of his own airplane. The Corsair has a nasty reputation at the edge of the envelope. If you pull too many GS in a turn, if you bleed too much speed, the left wing has a tendency to stall without warning. A stall in a trainer aircraft is a gentle mushing sensation. A stall in a Corsair under power is a violent, shuddering departure from controlled flight. The massive torque of the engine, no longer counteracted by the lift of the left wing, flips the 14,000-pound aircraft onto its back in a heartbeat. It's called a torque roll or a snap stall. At low altitude, it is fatal. Today's mission is a combat air patrol over the slot, the channel of water running down the spine of the Solomons. Braddock is flying wingman in a 4-ship division. They are at 18,000 feet, cruising above the localized cloud layers. The engine hums a deep bass vibration that rattles Braddock's teeth. They see them at 10,000 high. A dozen specks against the glaring white of the sun. Zeros escorting Betty bombers down from Rabaul. "Tally-ho, boys," Doyle's voice crackles in the headset. "Drop tanks, power to military, let's ruin their afternoon." Braddock pulls the lever to drop his external fuel tank. The Corsair leaps up as the weight falls away. He shoves the throttle forward, adjusting the mixture and propeller pitch. The engine roar deepens into a snarl. The manifold pressure gauge needles swing past the red line. The fight begins not as a duel but as a collision. The Corsairs dive into the Japanese formation, scattering the bombers. Braddock follows his lead, firing a short burst at a bomber's wing root, seeing pieces fly off. Then chaos. The formation dissolves into a swirling melee of individual dogfights. Tracers stitch lines of smoke across the blue sky. Braddock checks his 6 clear. He looks ahead, trying to rejoin his leader. And then the shadow falls over his cockpit. He looks up and left. A Zero, painted dark green with the bright red Hinamaru meatball insignia, is sliding in behind him. The Japanese pilot is good. He has used the sun to mask his approach. He is less than 400 yards out and closing. Panic is a cold chemical that floods the system instantly. Braddock forgets the briefing. He forgets the manuals. He forgets the physics of energy management. He reverts to the primal instinct of a cornered animal: flee the threat. He hauls the heavy control stick back into his gut and slams it to the right, trying to initiate a desperate, high-G brake turn. He is trying to turn inside the Zero's radius, exactly what he was told never to do. The Corsair groans under the strain. The G-meter spikes to 6. Braddock's vision grays out at the edges as the blood is forced from his head into his legs. The airspeed bleeds off rapidly: 300 knots, 250, 200. He looks over his shoulder. The Zero is still there, hanging effortlessly on the inside of the turn. The Japanese plane is light, nimble. It is designed for this slow-speed knife fight. The Corsair is a muscle car trying to out-corner a motorcycle. The Zero's nose pulls lead. Braddock sees the twinkling flashes of the 7.7 machine guns in its cowling. Bullets hammer against the armor plate behind his seat, a terrifying clang, clang, clang. Braddock is going to die. He knows it with absolute certainty. He pulls harder on the stick, a final, desperate, stupid reflex. He has pulled the Corsair too far. The angle of attack on the wings exceeds the critical limit. The airflow over the laminar surfaces detaches. The plane begins to buffet violently, shaking like a wet dog. The stall warning horn screams in the cockpit. And then the mistake happens. Braddock has forgotten the torque. He is at high power, low speed, and high angle of attack. The left wing gives up. It stalls completely. The right wing, still generating some lift combined with the massive, uncorked torque of the 2,000 horsepower engine, takes over. The world flips. The Corsair does not bank. It snaps. It rotates violently to the left, faster than any aileron roll Braddock has ever experienced. It goes inverted, then continues the rotation, tumbling through the sky like a discarded toy. Braddock's head slams against the canopy glass. His hands come off the controls. He is disoriented, spinning wildly, looking down at the green jungle rotating rapidly above him. I've killed myself, he thinks. I spun it. He grabs for the throttle, pulling it back to idle to stop the torque, and jams the rudder pedal opposite the spin to recover. The Corsair, rugged beast that it is, responds. The rotation stops with a bone-jarring shudder. Braddock finds himself flying level at 12,000 feet, gasping for air, his heart hammering against his ribs. He checks his 6, expecting the coup de grace from the Zero's 20 cannons. The sky behind him is empty. He looks around frantically. He spots the Zero. It is 1,000 feet ahead of him and 500 feet below, flying away straight and level. The Japanese pilot had been set up for a predictable, smooth banking turn. When Braddock's Corsair suddenly snapped, tumbled, and effectively stopped in midair, the Zero pilot couldn't react. The physics of his own speed carried him right past Braddock's tumbling aircraft. It was a massive overshoot. The Japanese pilot is now looking around, wondering where the American went. He thinks Braddock must have crashed or spun into the clouds. Braddock is alive. He is sweating so profusely his hands are slick inside his leather gloves. He didn't win the fight. He didn't execute a tactic. He panicked, committed the cardinal sin of Corsair flying, and nearly killed himself. But the result is undeniable. The enemy is in front of him, oblivious. Braddock's breath comes in ragged gasps. He looks at the airspeed indicator. He pushes the throttle forward again. The massive engine coughs, then roars back to life. He is still terrified. He is still green. But he is also beginning to understand something about the machine he is strapped to, something the manuals didn't mention. The landing back at Henderson Field is ugly. Braddock comes in too hot, bounces the Corsair on its stiff landing gear, and fights the massive torque that tries to pull the plane off the runway and into the palm trees. He finally wrestles the beast to a stop in the revetment, cuts the mixture, and lets the giant propeller shudder to a halt. The silence that follows is ringing. He sits in the cockpit for 5 minutes, unable to unbuckle his harness, his legs trembling uncontrollably. The ground crew chief climbs up onto the wing, takes one look at Braddock's face, pale beneath the grime and sweat, and doesn't say a word. He just helps the kid out of the cockpit. In the debriefing hut, the air is thick with cigarette smoke and nervous energy. Pilots are recounting their kills with frantic hand gestures. Major Doyle is marking excess on a chalkboard map of the slot. When it's Braddock's turn, he stands up, his flight suit stained with sweat. "I got separated, sir, jumped by a Zeke. I managed to shake him." Doyle eyes him critically. "Shake him how, Ensign? You didn't try to turn with him, did you?" Braddock hesitates. "The truth, I panicked and almost spun myself into the ocean," sticks in his throat. "No, sir, I just jinked hard," he overshot. Doyle grunts, skeptical but unwilling to press a green pilot who just survived his first real scrap. "All right, you lived. That's better than most do on day one. Go get a drink, Braddock." Braddock doesn't get a drink. He goes down to the maintenance hangars. The smell there is comforting. Grease, hydraulic fluid, the metallic tang of tools. He finds Chief Petty Officer Santini, a grizzled mechanic with knuckles scarred from years of wrenching on radial engines. Santini knows more about the soul of the F4U than the engineers at Vought. "Chief," Braddock says, leaning against a stack of oil drums, "tell me about the stall." Santini is wiping down a detached cylinder head. He stops and looks at the pilot. "Which one? The polite one the manual talks about, or the nasty one that puts you in the dirt?" "The nasty one, the snap." Santini spits on the dirt floor. "It's the torque, sir. That R2800 is a monster. It wants to twist the whole airframe around the propeller shaft. At high speed, the wings fight that torque with lift. But when you slow down and you pull hard, you're asking the wing to do too much. The left wing, the one fighting the torque, it quits first. It stalls." Santini uses his greasy hands to simulate the plane. When that left wing loses lift, the right wing is still flying, and the engine is still trying to twist you left. So bam. He flips his left hand over violently. "You snap roll. It ain't graceful, it's violent. Most rookies froze up when it happens. Ride it all the way down." Braddock nods slowly, replay the moment in his head. The violence of it, the speed of rotation. "It happened to me today, Chief, with a 0 on my tail." Santini raises an eyebrow. "And you're here talking to me, so you caught it?" "Yeah, I caught it." Braddock pauses. "But here's the thing, Chief. The Jap, he flew right by me. He couldn't track it. It was too fast for him to follow." Santini looks at the young ensign for a long moment. The mechanic's eyes narrow, calculating. "You're saying the plane did something you didn't tell it to do, and it saved your skin?" "I'm saying it stopped faster than I thought was possible. It was like hitting a brick wall in midair and changing direction instantly." Braddock spends the next 3 days, whenever he isn't flying combat patrols, thinking about that moment. He is an engineer by training, having done 2 years at Purdue before the war started. He thinks in terms of vectors, drag coefficients, and lift-to-weight ratios. Standard aerial combat is geometry. It's about arcs and radii. You try to get inside the other guy's circle. The 0 wins that game because it has a smaller turning radius. But what happened to Braddock wasn't geometry. It was chaos theory. He begins to realize that the Corsair's greatest weakness, its instability at the edge of a stall under power, might be a form of hypermaneuverability that no one is using. A controlled aircraft must bank, then pull, to change direction. That takes time. The Corsair, when it snaps, changes orientation almost instantly. It is a maneuver that exists in the undefined section of the flight manual. It is forbidden territory. On day 4, Braddock is assigned a maintenance test flight on a bird that just got a new carburetor. He is alone, at 15,000 feet above the Coral Sea. The sky is empty. He checks his harness. He tightens the straps until they cut into his shoulders. He takes a deep breath of canned oxygen. "All right, you bastard," he whispers to the plane. "Let's dance." He sets the throttle to combat power, 2,400 RPM, manifold pressure at 50 inches, airspeed 280 knots. He imagines a zero on his tail. He jams the stick hard right and pulls back sharply. The Corsair groans. The buffet starts immediately, shaking the instrument panel so hard the dials blur. The stall warning horn shrieks. Braddock's instinct is to ease off to recover. He forces himself to hold it. He pulls harder. Snap! The world inverts violently. The horizon is gone, replaced by a swirling blur of blue water and white clouds. The G-forces throw him against the side of the cockpit. It is disorienting, terrifying. He is inverted, nose down, tumbling. He has lost 100 knots of airspeed in 2 seconds. Now recovery, throttle back, opposite rudder, neutral stick. The plane shudders and obeys. He levels out at 13,000 feet. He has lost 2,000 feet of altitude, but he has done it. He tries it again and again. He learns the feel of the brake. He learns exactly how much back pressure it takes to induce the snap. He learns that if he adds a kick of left rudder into the torque just as the stall breaks, the snap is even faster, a violent cartwheel that practically stops the plane in midair. He calls it the gullwing snap. It is ugly. It is brutal on the airframe. It burns altitude like kindling. But it does one thing that standard tactics cannot do. It instantly changes the energy state of the fight. He is no longer just flying the plane. He is riding the edge of its catastrophic failure mode. He is learning that the Corsair is not a blunt instrument. It is a finely balanced weapon that is desperate to go out of control, and the secret is letting it go just far enough. He lands an hour later exhausted, his flight suit soaked again. But this time it isn't the sweat of panic. It is the sweat of exertion. He walks into the ready room that evening. The other pilots are playing poker, drinking lukewarm coffee. Braddock sits down next to his bunkmate, Lieutenant Tex Grady, a cynical veteran with 5 kills. "You look like you went 10 rounds with a gorilla, kid," Grady says, tossing a chip into the pot. "I think I figured something out, Tex," Braddock says quietly. "Yeah, what's that? How to keep your breakfast down in a dive." "No," Braddock says, staring at the map of the Solomon Islands on the wall. "I figured out why the Zero pilots can't hit us when we screwed up. They're flying math. We're flying physics." Grady looks at him, confused. "What the hell does that mean?" "It means," Braddock says, a strange intensity in his eyes, "that if you want to beat a dancer, you don't try to outdance him. You trip him." October 1943. The campaign for Bougainville is heating up. The skies over Empress Augusta Bay are a daily kill zone. The Japanese Army Air Force has moved in its elite units to stem the American tide. These aren't the green replacement pilots they've been facing. These are the veterans of China and the Philippines. Braddock is no longer a rookie. He has 50 combat missions under his belt. He has 2 confirmed kills, both achieved the right way through high-speed slashing attacks. But the secret weapon, the gullwing snap, remains unused in combat. It is a theory tested only in empty skies. It requires a level of desperation that he hasn't felt since that first day. Today's mission is close air support for the Marines on the beachhead. Braddock is carrying 2 500-pound bombs under his wings. The Corsair feels heavy, sluggish. They go in low, under the cloud deck at 3,000 feet. Flak bursts, black and oily, puff around them from Japanese jungle positions. Braddock pickles his bombs on a supply depot, feeling the plane leap upward as the ton of ordnance falls away. Bandits, 6 o'clock low, coming up from the deck. It's a trap. A flight of Zeros had been loitering down low, waiting for the Corsairs to drop their loads and be at their most vulnerable point, slow and recovering from a dive. Braddock checks his mirror. A Zero is already slotting in behind him. This one is different. It has a yellow stripe across the tail, a unit leader's marking. The pilot doesn't fire immediately. He stalks. He knows he has the energy advantage. He is waiting for the sure kill. Braddock pushes the throttle forward. The big radial engine screams, but the Corsair is slow to accelerate from 200 knots at this low altitude. The Zero is gaining. "Brake right, Braddock," his flight leader yells over the radio. Braddock ignores him. Braking right is what the book says. Braking right is what the Japanese pilot expects. Braking right will just put him in a prolonged turning fight that he will lose slowly and painfully. Braddock holds his course. He flies straight and level for 3 agonizing seconds. He is offering himself as bait. He needs the Japanese pilot to commit. He needs him to get greedy. Tracers flash past his right wing. The Zero has opened fire from 500 yards. The Japanese pilot is confident. He sees a laden, slow American fighter refusing to maneuver. An easy kill. Braddock watches the mirror. The Zero grows larger, 400 yards, 300 yards. He can see the pilot's leather helmet. Now, Braddock doesn't break into a turn. He jams the throttle to the firewall, war emergency power. The water injection kicks in. 2,800 horsepower hits the propeller shaft instantly. Simultaneously, Braddock hauls back on the stick with both hands, burying it in his stomach, and kicks the left rudder pedal to the stop. He is intentionally inducing the most violent accelerated stall possible. The Corsair's response is terrifying. The massive torque of the sudden power surge, combined with the high angle of attack and full left rudder, tears the aircraft out of the sky. It doesn't turn, it snaps. The noise is deafening, the groan of the airframe, the shrieking of the stall warning, the roar of the engine. Braddock is instantly subjected to negative GS that try to throw him through the top of the canopy. His vision goes red. The Corsair cartwheels wildly to the left, rotating through 270 degrees in less than a second. It is inverted, nose down, shuddering violently as if trying to shake itself apart. The Japanese ace in the Zero had his sights lead computed for a target moving at 250 knots in a straight line. In the blink of an eye, that target has vanished. It has effectively stopped in midair and displaced itself laterally, presenting a tumbling, chaotic profile that defies tracking. The Zero screams past Braddock's position, missing the tumbling Corsair by less than 50 feet. The Japanese pilot, his rhythm completely shattered, instinctively pulls up and to the right to avoid a collision. Braddock fights the controls. He is upside down at 2,000 feet, falling toward the jungle. He pulls the throttle back to idle, neutralizes the rudder and rolls the stick right. The Corsair, rugged and obedient once the aerodynamic torture stops, snaps back to level flight. Braddock is now at 1,500 feet. His speed has dropped to 160 knots, but his nose is pointed up, and the Zero is right there. The Japanese pilot, having overshot, has pulled up into a climbing right turn, looking back over his shoulder to see where the American went. He has presented the full planform of his aircraft, the belly and wings, as a massive, slow-moving target against the blue sky. Braddock doesn't think. He acts on muscle memory. He pushes the throttle forward again. He pulls the nose up, lead calculating the deflection shot instinctively. The massive cowling of the Corsair covers the Zero. He squeezes the trigger. 6.50 caliber machine guns, mounted 3 in each wing, roar to life. The Corsair shudders under the recoil. A stream of incendiary and armor-piercing bullets tears through the sky. The convergence point is perfect. The rounds slam into the Zero's wing root and cockpit area. The Japanese plane, lacking self-sealing fuel tanks or significant armor plate, doesn't just catch fire, it disintegrates. The wing shears off. The fuselage erupts in a brilliant orange fireball. The debris tumbles into the jungle canopy below. Braddock pulls off the target, gasping for air. His hands are shaking so badly he can barely hold the stick. He checks his mirror. Empty. "My God, Jack," Tex Grady's voice comes over the radio, sounding stunned. "What the hell was that? You looked like you were going in." "I almost did," Braddock whispers to himself. He had done it. He had taken the Corsair's worst characteristic, the thing that killed rookies, and used it as a weapon against an ace. He had bet his life on the fact that the Japanese pilot couldn't compute chaos. He rejoins the formation. The other pilots are looking at his plane, flying slightly apart as if it's radioactive. They saw the maneuver. It looked ugly, desperate, and completely amateurish. It looked like a pilot losing control of his aircraft. But the burning wreckage in the jungle below tells a different story. Braddock flies home in silence. He understands now. The smartest trick isn't a graceful loop or an Immelman turn taught in flight school. It isn't something you find in a manual. The smartest trick is knowing exactly where the edge of disaster is and stepping over it 1 second before the enemy does. The word spreads slowly at first. Pilots are superstitious creatures, and they are wary of any tactic that involves voluntarily departing controlled flight. In the mess halls of Bougainville and later, Vella, they talk about Braddock's kill. Some call it blind luck. Others call it suicidal. But as the war grinds on, and the Japanese pilots become more desperate and the fighting more vicious, the necessity for innovation grows. Major Doyle calls Braddock into his tent one rainy night a week after the Bougainville kill. Doyle looks tired. The strain of command is etching deep lines around his eyes. "The intelligence officer debriefed your gun camera footage, Braddock," Doyle says, pouring 2 generous shots of medicinal whiskey. "He thinks your camera malfunctioned. Says the film shows the world turning upside down and backward." Braddock takes the whiskey. "It wasn't the camera, sir." "I know, Tex saw it. Said you snapped that hog so hard he thought the wings were gonna fold." Doyle eyes him over the rim of the glass. "That's not in the book, son. You pull a stunt like that low to the ground 9 times out of 10, you're a smoking hole." "Yes, sir, but the 10th time the zero overshoots." Doyle sighs, leaning back in his canvas chair. "We're losing good men, Jack. They're trying to fly this plane like it's a wildcat. They try to turn, they bleed speed, and the zeros eat them alive. We need an edge. If you think this crazy Ivan maneuver of yours can be taught without killing half my squadron in training, I want you to teach it." So the training begins. It is unofficial, conducted away from the prying eyes of visiting brass. Braddock takes the new pilots up to 20,000 feet, where there is enough air to recover from mistakes. It is difficult to teach. You have to instruct a pilot to override every survival instinct they have. You have to tell them that when a zero is on their tail and pouring lead into their fuselage, the correct response is not to fly smooth, but to violently destabilize their own aircraft. You have to trust the plane's desire to kill you, Braddock tells a group of nervous replacements, standing under the massive bent wing of a Corsair on the flight line. The Corsair wants to snap. It wants to flip over. It's begging you to let it do it. The trick is knowing when to let it go and having the muscle to catch it before it hits the ground. He shows them the entry: high power, hard pull, full rudder into the torque. He shows them the recovery: power back, neutral stick, opposite rudder. They practice it. Some guys never get it. They are too smooth, too afraid of the violence of the snap. But others, the ones who are a little reckless, the ones who understand machines better than theories, they catch on. Tex Grady becomes a convert after he uses it to shake a persistent Tony fighter over Rabaul. "Damn thing nearly snapped my neck," Grady recounts, laughing nervously in the ready room. "But the Jap, I swear I saw the look on his face as he blew past me. He looked insulted." They start calling it the Vought Scissors, named after a legendary Corsair test pilot who supposedly first encountered the violent snap characteristics, though Braddock was the one who weaponized it. It becomes a squadron secret, a pocket ace to be played only when death is the alternative. The kill counts in the squadron begin to rise. Not dramatically, but steadily. Pilots who would have been shot down in defensive turning fights are suddenly reappearing, shaking and sweaty, but alive, reporting that the enemy just lost track of them. The Japanese pilots grow wary of the bent-wing planes. They learn that the Corsair is unpredictable. It doesn't fight fair. You can be behind it, setting up the kill, and suddenly it transforms into a tumbling mass of aluminum that is impossible to hit. The war moves north, the Philippines, Okinawa, the enemy changes. The veteran pilots are gone, replaced by poorly trained kamikaze pilots who don't know how to dogfight, only how to die. The aerial battles become turkey shoots. By 1945, the Corsair has been tamed slightly. Newer models have better stall warning systems, different propeller gearing. The violence is dampened down. Braddock, now a lieutenant commander with 12 kills and a chest full of medals, finds himself missing the old, nasty birds, the ones that fought you every inch of the way. The war ends in September 1945. The great prop-driven armadas are scrapped or mothballed. The jet age arrives with a scream of kerosene. Jets don't have propellers. They don't have torque. They don't snap roll because one wing stalls before the other. Aerial combat becomes about missiles and radar intercept geometry, cold and calculated. Braddock stays in the Navy for a few years after the war, flying early jets. They are faster, smoother, and infinitely safer, but they feel sterile to him. He retires in 1950 and goes back to Nebraska to run his family's hardware store. He rarely talks about the war. The memories are too loud, too visceral. But sometimes, on quiet summer afternoons, when the heat haze shimmers over the cornfields, he remembers the feeling. The vibration of 2,000 horsepower in his spine, the smell of cordite and fear. He remembers that day over Guadalcanal when he was green and terrified, and he made a mistake that should have killed him. He remembers how the flaw in the machine became his salvation. Historians would later write books about the Corsair. They would praise its speed, its ruggedness, its firepower. They would call it the finest carrier-based fighter of the war. But the pilots who flew it knew the truth. They knew that its greatest strength wasn't on the spec sheet. It was in the hidden, violent corners of its flight envelope, in the instability that only desperate men dared to exploit. The smartest trick wasn't smart at all. It was just a panicked rookie pulling too hard, and finding out that sometimes the only way to survive is to let go of control completely.